Welcome to the Real Python Podcast. This is episode 53. If you haven't visited the website lately, then you're missing out on all the updates to realpython.com. The site features a completely refreshed layout with multiple sections to help you take advantage of even more great educational Python content. This week on the show, we have Dan Bader, the person behind RealPython, and all these architectural changes. Among the features changed are a new bookmarking system, a section to keep track of what you've been learning lately, and much more advanced ways to search the site. A new tile system makes it easier to explore learning paths, quizzes, office hours, and other sections of the site. Dan shares details about the website technology stack and why he started using Python for the core content management system. He also talks about the struggle of being the sole maintainer and feature architect. This episode is brought to you by PyCharm. Do you want to get your work done faster? Use PyCharm, the Python IDE for professional developers. All right, let's get started. The Real Python Podcast is a weekly conversation about using Python in the real world. My name is Christopher Bailey, your host. Each week, we feature interviews with experts in the community and discussions about the topics, articles, and courses found at realpython.com. After the podcast, join us and learn real-world Python skills with a community of experts at realpython.com. Hey, Dan, welcome to the show.
Hey, Chris. Yeah, this is great. Finally, eh? I figured I'd wait till
Yeah, I know, totally.
till number 50.
You had to wait till we had a year, make sure we were doing okay.
Yep. The bed's been made, and I'm just ready to.
All right. Well, I'm so glad to have you here.
Yeah, likewise. I mean, we have our recurring call every week, so this is interesting, but
yeah, it's different
no environment. Video. Yep. And I want to say, you've been doing such a fantastic job at hosting the show and
thanks,
building it up to where it is now. I mean, it's just been really great.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I've learned a lot through the process and kind of refined what we're doing and found tons of amazing guests. And I'm excited what the next year and further will hold for all of that. So.
Yeah. I mean, cheers to episode 100, right?
Yeah, totally.
And then I think we should go in 1,000 increments, and we'll do powers of 10.
Okay, all right. That sounds fine with me. I'm enjoying myself. So, and it's been fun having David on. That's been really cool.
Yeah.
No, I'm excited to lay out what's coming up in the near future, and it's really kind of cool to have you come on and talk about RealPython, the site in general, and huge changes for the last year, and a lot of them really recently. And then I don't know if we'll have time, we could talk a little bit about what you see as potential areas that we can look at for the future too. I don't know if that'll be kept under wraps and secret or not.
No, for sure. Yeah. No, it's I try to be pretty open with that stuff, but yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's so many changes that, at least public changes that have happened just recently over the last couple of weeks, and there was a lot of work kind of behind the scenes on the back end that allowed us to do these things with the learning platform. And yeah, I'm super excited to finally talk about it, because it's been such a big part of my life, for the last couple of months. And yeah, so this is great.
Yeah, it's and you're the primary architect behind all of it, which is pretty amazing.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. Do you run the ideas by other people?
Yeah, I mean, always trying to do stuff that's based on real feedback. And listeners, have probably seen this on the site. We usually have feedback buttons sprinkled all over the place. There's some automated surveys and stuff that we run. And then what I've found is that the important stuff will always keep on bubbling up, right? Somebody will raise it over and over again, and that's the critical data point.
Yeah.
like one thing, for example, was it was really hard for people to be able to resume what they were doing, kind of continue where they left off when they were using real Python to learn something, and they were coming back like a day later, and it was really hard for them to just continue what they were doing and pick up where they left. And that was one of the things that was just naturally kind of bubbled up higher on the site, and also based on feedback that we had within the team, where David would hear it in office hours. We would hear it from kind of our author team. It would just be something that would come up all the time. And so that was like a natural thing that was pretty high up on the list. And that, I think usually that's how it happens. And I think that's the best way to also do product direction. Not always maybe, because I think, it's easy to get kind of reactive to things. And then a lot of times when somebody suggests a solution, I try not to like just go for the solution or implement that directly, but it's more like the signal is in the, hey, this is painful, and here's how I think this should be done. But you kind of want to disregard the here's the how this should be done part, and more focus on like this being a signal for, this sucks. Like this is not good. This is a painful
There's
thing.
a sharp edge here. We should look at sanding it off. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
So I was noticing that, and of course I spend a ton of time on the site, not only, reading articles, but setting up courses and doing stuff with the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like it goes pretty far back. Like, I don't know if there's any limits to the continue learning, but how does that work exactly?
Yeah. So, man, like, first of all, I want to say since you're working behind the scenes as well, with me and the rest of the team, like you've seen all the rough edges essentially, right? Because
Sure.
I think it's a lot more polished on kind of the public facing parts than some of our like internal tooling is. So I think your question was about this continue learning aspect.
It's the first it's the first thing right below like what would be the newest article.
Yeah. So
or course.
Yeah. So what we've done there is previously, when you would go to realpython.com, which is what we call the front page. So if you just type if somebody goes and types in realpython.com into their browser, this is what they see. And previously it's just like a long list, like actually like an infinite scrolling list of, or not infinite, but you could scroll for a while and it would keep on loading stuff. A list of learning resources by publishing date.
Very blog-like,
and it's kind of the history of the site. It started out as a coding, like programming blog, and now we've got different types of content. I mean, there's the podcast is integrated into the site as well. For example, there's video courses, there's quizzes, and all these other types of things. And it was just getting harder and harder for learners to understand what's available. I mean, I just checked, we have like over 2,200 pieces of like Python learning content on the site.
That's
and
a lot,
so,
yeah.
at some point, like a flat list is just not gonna cut it. And so we did until about, I want to say, a year and a half ago, we didn't really have any concept of progress on the site, like learning progress. It was just like, okay, maybe you're reading this article, maybe then as people were starting to watch courses, they're consuming content and they're learning, but the site didn't really know that about you. So you'd have to use your browser to bookmark stuff, or use Google to find content on the site.
Yeah.
And so I've been on this quest to change that, to really improve the learning platform, or improve RealPython as a learning platform. And we needed to do a number of things on the back end side there to really have, a data model or a representation of that learning progress. And so what's happened now with this like most recent update that we published, when you're logged into your RealPython account and you go to realpython.com to the front page, you'll see kind of as a headliner, the latest like newest tutorial that's been published, whether that's a course or whatever.
Yeah.
And then underneath, it'll have a headline sort of Netflix style that tells you, okay, here are the last couple of things that you looked at that are unfinished. Why not go continue like reading this tutorial or finishing that course? And it may look like such a straightforward thing, like, oh, why not just have that? But it took a while to make this happen. And there's been like a lot of stuff on the backend side that needed to change for that. So, for example, we didn't even have a concept of what it means to complete a tutorial or to read it. Like the site wasn't aware of it.
There's that for the video courses. Has always kind of had a bit of a completion tool pretty early on.
Yep. Yeah, that's right. That we had that from the get-go. And I think that was a good model, or it was like a great way to learn about kind of what was working, what was not working from a UI perspective.
Yeah.
But it was the way it started out, it was a completely separate like universe compared to the articles. And yeah, we only had that for courses. I think when you look at real Python, or the way I look at it, it's, oh, here's a great like 90s words for us, right? Multimedia.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, it's got a lot of baggage, right? But really, that's what it is, I think, and that's
it's purely, what a good definition for it.
Yeah, and so my definition of it is, okay, you want to learn Python, you want to, or you want to get better at your Python skills, you want to stay up to date what's happening in the Python world. If we just give you courses, or if we just give you, written tutorials, I don't think that's really going to cut it. But really, I think what helps people the most is when they can really immerse themselves in a topic, and with various different forms of media, right? And so in our case, for real Python, that could be a written tutorial on a particular topic that's really deeply researched, that is almost like a book length sometimes. We've had some insane articles where we had to also implement some like infrastructure improvements to be able to actually like serve this to people, because it would, affect their browsers and whatnot. You want to be able to access that, and then you want to be able to maybe watch a video course on the same topic that's got that broken down. You want to engage with other learners in the comments, let's say. Maybe, you, Chris, you had a great guest talking about that topic on the podcast, so we want to be able to surface that for you as well. And then on top of it, we want to have an interactive quiz that learners can take to kind of see where they stand on that particular topic. And if it's a broader topic, not just one like particular like thin slice into a certain topic, then we also want to give them like a sequenced, what we call a learning path. So somebody can start at point A, and then we'll guide them from A to B to C, and help them really broadly cover that topic. And so that's kind of the direction that we are still going. And a lot of this just didn't really exist, or you had to, as the learner, you'd have to put in a lot of effort to make this kind of learning experience, this kind of learning environment happen for you. Whereas now,
you have to have like a journal or a notebook to keep track of everything.
Yeah, exactly, right. I mean, I hated it every single time. I had to tell someone in our like community Slack channel that somebody was asking for bookmarks. We would just have to point them to like, hey, sorry, you got to use your browser bookmark, and then they would inevitably come back and say like, but I'm using the course lesson bookmarks. Like, why can't I just bookmark the articles as well? And it's like, yeah, you're right. That sucks. Like, we want to change that.
So the continue learning, for like me, it's looking at a handful of articles and then courses I've been working on and so forth. Is the continue learning work for all the different types of content?
So right now, it actually only takes written tutorials into account and video courses.
Okay.
But I think in the future, there's room to experiment with this. I think certainly the quizzes should be there.
Okay.
For learning paths, I think it might make sense. I don't know if it might make sense as well, although I'm thinking, okay, maybe that's more like a recommendation thing, or we could say, okay, you're on this path, so here's like the next thing you should do. It's still a bit fluid there, how to best surface it. I mean, I kind of like the idea of this continue learning section to have some amount of intelligence, where it's just basically trying to do the right thing, right? If you've finished everything that you had in progress, well, maybe it should show you the next thing that's on a learning path that you've started. Or if it's, if you finished all the things, you don't have any open like learning paths that you looked at, maybe it should nudge you and say like, oh, look, based on what you've recently like completed and probably enjoyed for that reason, here's another related thing that you might want to check out. Or if we don't have that, we could say, okay, look, like here's what's popular right now. This is just the last 2 weeks, like this has been our most read article, and why not check it out?
Yeah.
So I think from a user perspective, like that's probably nicer than like breaking it down into like, oh, here are your recommendations, here's this other thing. Because at the end of the day, I mean, it should be magical, right? And you go to the site, and like the first thing you see should be like, oh yeah, cool, I want to click on that. I feel motivated to learn this, and it's going to help me. It's going to make me a better programmer, better at my job, whatever.
Yeah. If you get to the end of an article, will it drop out of that list? Do you like mark it as completed? The same with the course?
Yes. So it won't do it automatically. And that's something that we tested,
Oh,
but
okay.
it's not the best experience, I think, because a lot of times what readers will do is, and I do that myself, I'll jump to the end of the article to look, check out the conclusion, right?
Yeah, skim it.
Yeah, or you're skimming it. And so we set it up so that completing a written tutorial is always a manual action.
Okay.
Whereas in courses, if you watched all the videos, kind of the progress maps really well to the video watch time. Like once you've seen everything, that means you've completed the course. You get your completion certificate, and we celebrate with you. But on the article, I think it's more. It's less linear a lot of times. Although our articles are written with that in mind, where you could start at the top, sit down, kind of work through the whole thing, and it will will take you by the hand and guide you through everything. But just what we noticed is that a lot of times that's people want to kind of survey the content, and so if we automatically mark stuff as completed, that's a bit tricky. So we left that up to the user, but it will show up there. Like the system will know, okay, you started reading this thing. And it also has sort of an estimate of how far we think you've read, which, I mean, it's kind of dumb. It's just looking at, whatever section is visible right now, and then kind of calculates a percentage score based on that, or a percentage like reading depth.
Yeah.
But for you to say like, I'm done with this, it's a manual action. Like you have to signal that to us. And you can do so in various ways. On the article, there's a couple of buttons where you can mark an article as completed, or also bookmark it if you wanted to, surface it later and kind of review it at some point.
Okay, cool. Moving beyond that, what do you want to dive into next that you've updated?
Yeah, good question. So, like I said, this is part of a broader theme. And one of the other interesting bits or things that has happened here is our search has seen a ton of improvements over the last month and couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So it was continuously getting better since like 2017, but this most recent iteration, I think, is really, really a big leap forward, where now it is personalized to a degree. Like when you're logged in, it will take into account the content that you've completed. You can now run search queries directly on realpython.com, where you can say, okay, hi, I'm Chris. I want to learn about Django views, and I want to learn this at an intermediate or advanced level. And the resource type that I want for this, I only want like video courses, or I only want articles, or I want video courses, articles, and podcasts. And then, for all of those except podcasts, only show me stuff that I haven't completed yet. So,
okay.
And it's just something you can click together with various filters and stuff. And so you can go in there and you can type in, okay, show me all the resource on Django views, then filter down to just, intermediate to advanced level, and then filter down to only video courses. And then it will highlight to you exactly that. There's other types of like sorting you can apply. So you can say, give me all the Django stuff that I've completed and order it by when I last viewed it. So that would be a great way for you to review things, for example. We're basically making all that data available to users and to learners to be able to improve their, to their information and for them to be able to know, like, okay, here's probably the next thing that I should check out, and also make it really easy for someone to find something they've seen in the past. And so that really felt like a huge change, like just being able to support that type of search query.
Yeah, I'm liking the status thing. That's really cool, where you have bookmarked things that you've completed, again based on the user, right, and then in progress or not started at all. And then the skill levels, those are kind of unique filters you don't usually see in a search engine that's very specific to the platform.
Yeah, like it's really tailor made, for learners and for the type of content that we have too. And I think a great strength of RealPython is this multimedia aspect. The kind of the diversity of types of media and learning resources. Where on certain topics like decorators, you could probably spend like days just really doing a deep dive into this type of content. And sure, I mean, it takes a special type of person to really do that and take all of that in. But it is available, and it's all connected in a way that makes sense. Which at least in my experience, that didn't really happen when I was just, let's say, I'm searching for a topic on Google or whatever, and I find like a blog post and I find a YouTube video, and these are all like disjointed things. And on RealPython, I can tie all of that together I can really immerse myself into that topic and have it all in one place and with one, like quality control team in place that will
Yeah.
make sure, like, this is accurate and this is good stuff. It's vetted.
I think you've covered this on another podcast where you were talking to Michael Kennedy, but I don't know if you wanted to describe a little bit of the Python that is behind real Python.
Yeah, sure.
What frameworks and stuff that you're using.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I love talking about this stuff, because it's such a big part of my day. And Real Python actually used to be hosted on PHP for a while, and I think it was always like, and then it sort of became like a static site, so just static HTML. But there were some bits and pieces that were actually powered by PHP. This is way back when, like before I took over the site and stuff. One of the first things I did when we relaunched it, at the end of 2017, start of 2018, was I want this thing to actually be running on Python. We can't like make the build like the Python learning resource, and we cannot host it on PHP. So there was a couple of like months of me basically working, just having Netflix open with Star Trek TNG on endless loop and hacking away Django code, and relaunching the site as a Django app built on Python 3, with Postgres and Redis as the backend services. So Postgres as the database, and then Redis for caching and sort of ephemeral data storage. But back then, like the search didn't really. It didn't really exist, I don't think, in the first iteration. But if we're talking specifically about like the search feature, that's built on Postgres full text search, which is
okay, cool.
I mean, Postgres is just a fantastic database. I mean, I'm just so grateful for all the open source folks who are making this project work and continue to improve it, because it is really amazing. I mean, I think it's wonderful what we're able to achieve with quite a small team. And we don't have to worry about pulling in like Elasticsearch or other sort of infrastructure. We can do all of this stuff out of Postgres and with pretty good performance. So yeah, Postgres is just amazing.
Don't waste your time configuring your IDE for your Python project. Get everything out of the box. With PyCharm Pro, you get expert Python assistance, including smart refactorings, code completion, and an integrated debugger. Web development support for popular frameworks, such as Django and Flask. Get your project up and running with 3 free months of PyCharm Professional Edition. Click on the PyCharm banner in the episode description, and make sure to use the Real Python coupon code at checkout. That's Real Python, all caps, no spaces. The offer ends April 30th. Moving beyond search a bit, what were some of the things you had to do to like implement bookmarks and such within articles themselves?
Yeah, I mean, for this stuff, it was one of the easier parts. Like there's basically a little bit of UI. So, you need a button for it. And we wanted to have that button in several places. So you need to like synchronize that in the UI. Like when I click the bookmark button here, it should mark the other stuff as bookmarked as well. The tricky bits are, not really tricky, but, one of the things is like we have quite a bit of traffic, and a big part of our infrastructure, the content management system behind realpython.com, I want to make sure it's fast and it's a good experience for people. And so it is, and on the other hand, I also want it to be quite maintainable with a small team. So it is not in many ways like using, especially on the front end, like, the latest and greatest technology there. Like it's still primarily built around sort of static pages, standard Django views, which has like SEO benefits too. So one tricky bit there was kind of, figuring out how to do this in a way that wouldn't require like us fundamentally rewriting how the site like renders content. But I view as all the JavaScript bits, I view them more as like incremental improvements, right? You should have a pretty great experience even with JavaScript disabled on the site. And I think you can get that today. I view things like the bookmarks and that stuff more as an add-on instead of it being like a part that where the whole site is built around that concept. Like I'm talking about like single page applications, for example, where basically your browser, your backend only provides like an API, and then the front end is just purely done in JavaScript, and it fetches all the content, renders it, displays it. And if your browser can't execute that JavaScript, there's just nothing that you see. It's just an empty page. And that approach makes like some things quite a bit easier and other things harder. And so for us, like I always was kind of leaning more towards the classic Django approach, and then with incremental improvements on top. And we've kind of strayed away from that a little bit. So the search interface, for example, is a Vue.js application, or Vue.js like view that is rendered entirely like client side.
Okay.
But then for the bookmarks, it gets rendered in Django in a template, and then we sort of activate it with JavaScript. Like there's a bit of JavaScript that hooks up all the events and stuff, and it keeps it synchronized. So pretty straightforward. And then there's an API that we have on the back end that will then store that state change. So if you click the bookmark button, then we're gonna save that bookmark for you and then surface it in other places. And so the trickiness really comes more from exposing that information in other places on the site. So for example, in the search, right? So then you want to be able to say, okay, well, I'm searching for, let's say I read this Django article, I bookmarked it. Now I'm searching for Django related stuff, and I want to see that bookmark icon in the results there. And I want to be able to filter on that. So all of a sudden that means everybody gets different search results, which because they're personalized now. And so that means, previously we had the assumption, okay, everybody's getting the same results. It just depends on the keywords. So you can cache everything 100% on the keywords. And in our case, we were actually caching that, like it was multi-layered caching, but we were caching that on the CDN edge. So what that means is we use a content delivery network that serves all the static assets, like images and stuff. You kind of want to do that as close as possible to where your users access the site from. So that means, you want that stuff cached somewhere in Europe. You want to cache it somewhere in on the East Coast, on the West Coast, and other places of the world. And that's what a content delivery network does. And we're using Cloudflare for that. And one of the nice things with the old search approach was we were able to just cache the search results on that CDN edge, on that CDN server as well. So meaning the results were like super fast, because if somebody had searched for Django before you, then it would just load up instantly.
I got those results right here. Here they go.
Yeah, exactly, right. And everybody would get the same results. And now that's not true anymore. Like it needs to be personalized. And so, and kind of coming back, to some of the stuff I touched on earlier, I wanted to be able to do that without really like massively complicating our infrastructure, because it is, a small dev team. I mean, of size 1, basically.
Mostly, yeah.
And you're talking to it right now. And so, we have other internal tools and stuff, where more people are involved. But for the CMS, like it's mostly me. And so I didn't want to, bring in a bunch of stuff where I had to spend then a lot of time, like understanding how to run it, like Elasticsearch and hosting that or managing that or paying for someone else to manage it. So those were some of the constraints, I think, that made this tricky for me, because I wanted to make sure, it's fast, it's accurate. And the other constraint was I would like to not like massively increase our infrastructure costs, both in like maintenance and like actual like, cost. Yeah, I think it's worked out quite well. We're still able to cache like most of that stuff, and then we're augmenting it. So it's basically like a multi-layered process where, we're fetching all the results, and then we augment it, kind of merge your personal like progress data into it. And then that's what we serve back to you as the user, and you can see that.
Yeah, sounds like it. So many layers.
Yeah, it's all these little things, man. Like it's where it's like should be so straightforward, but then there is a bunch of moving parts, and especially making it fast. Like I didn't want people to wait a long time.
Yeah, the performance part, right?
Yeah.
So then the other thing you kind of were able to do in the redesign is sort of surface this whole area that says explore real Python. And, some of this is things that are new this year, which is super cool. I mean, the podcast being a tile that's on there, and then David Amos, taking on the office hours thing, which we've talked about briefly on the podcast, but haven't really delved too deep into that. But that's been a whole big upgrade, and that'll be, I don't know, I guess in the summer, it'll be a year for that. So it's coming up pretty quick too.
Yeah, that's been a wonderful thing. The office hours for those listeners who don't know are like weekly Q&A calls with David from the Real Python team, where people can bring their questions and or just watch it as sort of like a lecture. I think that's been a wonderful add-on. Like I'm super excited about like the community features that we've added to Real Python. And I would count the podcast to that as well. I love like listening to the show, and usually I get like a sneak peek, and we talk about like titles and stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I think it fits that fits right into that area where it's like, it's not just it's not just the learning content, but it's also kind of getting a different perspective, how real people use this stuff, and being able to ask questions in our community chat and whatnot. And so, well, one piece of feedback, going back to all the way when we started talking about this, like how do we decide, what to change, what to improve, what to work on?
Yeah.
I mean, that was another big item on that list, where I might have even been on office hours where, David was showing some like an interactive quiz or something, and somebody was like, "Oh my God, this is amazing!" I didn't realize like this was on the site, and I mean, it is in the navigation menu there, but it's in a drop down,
Right.
and so that immediately like made me think like, man, like this is just not visible enough, and I get it, I get it. Like if you're browsing the site on mobile, on your phone or something, maybe it's not, it's not the biggest screen or something like that. This stuff is like one or two clicks away, and it's not. We have an onboarding course, like a welcome course where I walk you through the whole site as a new learner and explain this to you. But I get it. Like people skip that, and not everybody watches it, and I want to make sure just it's easier for people to really see what's in store. When they use realpython.com. And so again, kind of sticking to this Netflix like theme, which I mean. Like I'm watching a lot of Netflix right now because it's still the pandemic, and we're just
right, exactly
at home a lot. But one of the things I think they do really well is, well, you're going to the site or you pull up the app and they show you exactly like, hey, you can continue watching this thing. You're probably going to like it. And here's all this other stuff that we have for you, these like different types of shows and whatnot. And in our case, I think it's a bit more complicated because it's not just all like video content, but I felt like we really needed to just directly show you, okay, there's learning paths, and there's quizzes, and there's the podcast, and there's office hours, and there's this other thing, and here's the books
right.
that we've published. And this was all on there, but it was also kind of hidden away. And this new front page design now has these sections, and it will be very easy for us to add more sections in the future. And one of those sections is the Explore Real Python section, where it basically like highlights all the different areas in these tiles, and then points out, okay, well, here's the podcast. Why is the podcast good for you? Because you can hear about, all the wonderful new things in the world of Python, how our quiz is going to help you, and all of these other things. And I think that's been like a really positive change, especially for new learners and new people using the site.
Yeah. I think it's huge. I mean, it's the discovery part of it.
Yeah.
I I feel like the drop-down menu thing is just such a, I don't know, it's like a barrier, especially mobile wise for a lot of people, but just in general, like having the stuff in front of you is really going to make it easier. I mean, you go back to your example of like a streaming service, how people are going to go to a drop-down menu of something like that when there's all these other things that are on tiles right in front of them, and they've kind of, I don't know, been indoctrinated in that methodology of like just, infinite scrolling through stuff or having potentially a menu. And so I like that, I think that's really helpful. Having these things kind of like, pop up in the surface, and then it's really well combined into the search area too, with it being a whole section about exploration.
Yeah, 100%. Like you're absolutely right about the, we could, I don't know, like I could like argue all I want for like, oh, but it should be obvious, right? It's there, like there's a drop down menu, but
right.
The reality is just, it's not. The reality is whatever users want to see and want to use, right? And so it doesn't make sense to fight against that. And I don't know, somebody listening to this might think like, oh, none of this is like rocket science, like this should be obvious. But I would agree with that to a certain degree. But it is really quite interesting, where a lot of plans or a lot of like things that we've tried on the platform, especially in the past, it is just so interesting how, when things go live, like the rubber hits the road, and then to get that real user feedback, which again, like another community thing, we have the Real Python community Slack, or it's a chat based on Slack. And I usually like give people a way to get like have early access to some of these new features. So we set up like a feature flag, and then people can preview that those kinds of changes, and we can get some early feedback on that stuff without rolling it out to everyone. And so it can be sometimes be a bit like half finished stuff, or maybe something that works but it's not like super performant, which with most of these changes that we talked about, like actually the performance part is taking the most time. Like it's not that hard to get the data and make sure, okay, here's like the list of things you should continue. But then what's more difficult is like, we have 3 million readers a month, and not all of them are signed into the site, like most of them aren't, but the it we want to be able to run this on like a small team. So that means we don't want to have huge infrastructure. We don't want to have huge infrastructure costs, and then being able to kind of optimize that stuff and make it happen so that it's good and quick experience. It was really a key thing, because initially I was thinking about kind of hosting Real Python on WordPress and then with a bunch of plugins, and I kind of sort of had a setup, that I liked. So again, this is like a couple of years ago, but then I just felt like there are certain things that I'm just not happy with performance-wise, and I have no freaking clue how to optimize it. And now it's a Django app. It's my bread and butter. It's all done in Python. I enjoy working with it, and we can really tune it and make sure the things that the features we want to make available are fast and convenient and exactly the way we want them.
So if a person is, say an irregular user of Real Python, and they don't have an account per se, because I know that there's our membership, which gets you into the video courses and into the community chat and some of the other things that we've already talked about. But if somebody wants to take advantage of just some of these features of just like really sort of just keeping track of their progress on so forth, what's involved in that? Do they just need to like sign up for the newsletter or something like that? How does it work?
Yeah, so it's actually just tied to a free account. So you just need to, the first time you try using one of these features, will prompt you to either log in or create a new account. It's completely free. You can use GitHub login, so it's literally one click away and like another confirmation then, and or you can use email and password, and that's about it for these new features. So the both the new search features and also like the article completion, that stuff, it's currently not gated in any way, like behind a paywall or anything like that. Yeah, I mean, one of the things I like about what we're doing is that we can, make a lot of the learning materials available for free, or have them be ad supported, especially in places where like the cost might be prohibitive. Yeah, I want to keep it like that as much as we can. I think there's always kind of like some thoughts around like, are people going to abuse that sort of thing, or anytime you make some kind of API available, is somebody going to do something mischievous with that? But for now, I want to keep this open, and yeah. So if listeners want to try it, just go to realpython.com. You won't see these like new sections in the Explore section yet, although that might happen. That's going to happen pretty soon. So depending on when you're listening, like you might already see it, and you'll be wondering like what the heck I'm talking about. But yeah, basically you need to make an account. Just click on the sign in button, or click on any of the bookmark buttons on articles, and it'll prompt you to make an account. And then you get access to all these features. Or if you're in a search and you start filtering by something that requires personalization, it will also prompt you to log in or make an account.
Yeah, so pretty quickly they're already into it. That's cool.
Yeah. Just really wanted to make it, easy to use these things, and just have like a super low barrier to entry there. And yeah, one of the next things we need to do is to roll out the front page, even like to all users, like even if you're not signed into an account, you're just like a regular reader. And then obviously, it's another conversation around, okay, what are some of the empty states for these things? So for example, we can't show you any bookmarks. Another section we have on there. So bookmarks is one. Another section is review what you've learned, which will try and intelligently resurface stuff that you've recently completed. So for me, it's showing me like, oh, there's the Python modulo course. Maybe it's time to review this because it's something that I marked as complete, and it's been a while since I looked at it. And so now the system says like, hey, you should probably, if you want to refresh your memory, now would be a good time. And so again, we can't really do that if you're not logged in. You don't have any of that history with Real Python. And so that's a bit tricky, but I think certainly stuff like the Explore Real Python section would be great for people to be able to see that, even if they're not logged in. Maybe some like, what's popular right now, or something like that, I think could be interesting. Yeah, that's something we're going to build out over time, and then bring in other stuff as well, like other types of content, like the quizzes. I think be wonderful for people to go in and be able to compare like how their quiz scores improve over time. And yeah, that sort of thing. So we've got like a really, really good foundation now, and we're going to continue building on top of it.
This week, the spotlight is a bit different. I want to let you know that the Python Basics book is now available as a paperback book. The book has been written by frequent guest David Amos, along with previous guest Joanna Jablonski, and this week's guest Dan Bader, along with help from the Real Python tutorial team. We had a detailed discussion about the book back in episode 32 with David Amos, so you can check out some of it there. Let me give you some of the details. There's an overwhelming amount of information about Python on the internet, but for many beginners who are studying on their own, the lack of structure for what you should learn and in what order is missing. Here are some of the highlights and features of the book. It covers each concept and language feature in a logical order, has a simple to follow step-by-step roadmap to develop foundational skills. Each step in this complete beginner's curriculum is explained and illustrated with short and clear code samples. It includes coding exercises within each chapter and interactive quizzes to help fast-track your progress and to ensure you always know what to focus on next. If you already have some prior coding experience, even better. You'll be able to move that much quicker and get a crash course that brings you up to speed with modern Python programming. Get RealPython's practical introduction to Python 3.9 that jumps right into the meat and potatoes without sacrificing substance. Become fluent in Python and gain programming knowledge you can apply in the real world today. The physical paperback book is available on Amazon, or you can find out more about it and how to order your copy at pythonbasicsbook.com. That's no spaces, pythonbasicsbook.com. One of the things that you have in there is the progress, and I was wondering about like what it took to implement that. What are some of those changes that you had to make, I guess maybe even infrastructure-wise?
Yeah. I mean, what it took to get started on it, it was like a lot of complaining, basically, like feedback. And
Okay.
there was one thing that stood out there. I mean, I'm joking about the complaining, but I love like hearing feedback like that, like whether that's on Twitter or email or in our like internal communities stuff. But there was one request. So we have this feature now. It's called Real Python for Teams, which is basically online Python training for teams. It's just like our membership, our individual membership or subscription access to all of the learning content on Real Python, but it is tied to a single billing account. So company XYZ can go in and they can purchase like 10, 20 seats of this and then invite their whole team, just send them a link. Everybody can join the group, and then they can go and learn stuff on Real Python and access all of the content, access all of the community features, all the Q&A stuff, everything. Just like in the regular membership, but it's all built through a company account, and there's a central like dashboard where you can have like a company admin that can add, remove people, and kind of change their permission levels and whatnot. And so there's been more and more demand for that, and more interest in that. And what's come up more recently there was a request around audits. Some countries give away like credits for training. So companies can get reimbursed or get like a tax credit if they provide certain types of training in certain industries. And this one company, they said they needed some kind of report that showed, well, we actually spent the money on this training thing, and here's proof that our people are actually using it, right? And so I was like, okay, so well, I'm going to do like quickly resolve that by hacking something together and just kind of pulling out some report into like Google Sheets or whatever that I can share. But really what we need longer term is for this to be integrated into the team dashboard that we already have. And so the nice thing about like all of this progress stuff is now as a team admin, you can generate an audit report or analytics report that gives you a breakdown of like, okay, your entire team has viewed like, 700 hours of training. This is broken down into like, this and that many articles viewed and this and that many like course lesson viewed. And they've like completed specifically these things. And it's all, you can print out pages and pages of this stuff and then just fly through that audit. And there's, certain certain stats are interesting, I think also just purely from like, hey, we're paying for this thing. Is this actually helping our people? Are they using it? So that's one thing. But then, the big other part that I didn't really realize or appreciate before is these audit requirements around training.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, I've seen other services be like that, and you're not understanding like, okay, well, who's watched what and so forth. But that seems like to be a common request that, I see, especially inside of larger organizations. And then it's nice that you can kind of have that for, users in general. Like you can kind of reuse a lot of the infrastructure, so you can kind of track like, okay, well, this is what you've watched so far, and you can use it for the review, what you've learned, and these other kinds of features.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for individual users, it's maybe like less interesting to just say like, oh, you spent like this many hours on the site. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like we can use that then in other, like, presented in more useful ways, right? And we can say like, oh, well, maybe in the future we could say, okay, well, you spent quite a bit of time on this particular article, but you haven't completed it yet. So maybe that's something we should kind of nudge you about.
Right.
Or that could be a signal at some point in the future where we could say, okay, well, clearly you're like super interested in this topic, so check out these other things, right? Or we've just published something that's related to that, like, hey, here's a podcast episode on this thing, whatever Django views, or some like data science topic, and we could just immediately like tell you about it, and when you go back to the site and surface that and suggest it to you. And I think that'd be pretty cool. I do have some concerns around, how do we do that without it being like, with it actually being useful?
Right.
I think that's always a big question, because I think, well, we have a real responsibility to help people learn this stuff, right? Like that's ultimately the goal. Like I don't care as much about, okay, how much time do people spend on the site, or like how much, like, it's not even a metric that we really like surface or track anywhere. But it's more, for me, it's more about like, hey, I want to hear from people that they've gotten something out of the tutorials that we create, where somebody can say like, hey, I got this job, or I built this thing, or I don't know, I built this like home automation thing, or I helped my kid like, script their Minecraft stuff,
right,
or something like that.
Yeah.
And so it's always a balance, being able to do this without it just being like fluffy stuff on top that doesn't really add to the experience. But I think we're going to be able to do some cool new features kind of based around the stuff we already have. Certainly that one would be being able to continue down a learning path and kind of subscribing to a learning path or following a learning path. And then you can say, all right, so this is going to be like a 4-week project or whatever, and now you've completed like these things, so now it's time to start with the next thing. And but that's all like human curated, right? Which again is a difference. I think how we're approaching things at Real Python is like, it's not based on like recommendation systems, but the learning paths are set up by a team, and we're trying to, we're setting them up so that can actually put stuff into sequence for you.
Right.
And it's not just like, oh, here's some stuff that has the same keyword, whatever, go figure it out, right? So that's kind of the philosophy behind it. And so we want to see like where does the technology support like really fit in the best there.
Yeah, cool. So there's been a lot of other additional changes this last year in the video courses. We had Sadie come on and talk about her work on creating the transcripts and the closed captions.
Yeah.
And at this point, I think we're done. Like as far as like the entire back catalog of all the video courses, that we have all the captions completed. I know she was doing final review of some of the transcripts, but
yeah. I mean, that's just wonderful. Like huge shout out to Sadie and you, Chris, like for making that happen. I mean, that was I think that's such a great accessibility step forward for us there. Where we have subtitles for everything now, and then also for content discoverability.
Yeah,
so
search.
Again, coming back to the search stuff, all the subtitles are indexed, and so if I search for a certain keyword or Django views again or whatever, it's gonna surface me lessons that mention this based on the transcripts. And then when I click on that, I can see as I'm playing the video on the video, like on the lesson page, it's actually like highlighting me where I am in the transcript, and so I can quickly jump to that part of the video. And yeah, I think that's huge, so handy. Yeah.
I love that navigation is so much easier.
Yeah,
it's great to navigate that way. We started this podcast a year ago. We started the office hours, and then this is kind of a multi-year process, but it looks like it's coming to fruition here in 2021. But the couple of books, Python Basics, which David Amos was on to talk about, we're looking at the print version of that soon. And then I don't know if he give you updates on the other one.
C Python internals.
Yeah, with Anthony Shaw's book. Yeah, the C Python internals. Yeah.
Yeah. So you can't see it right now, but I actually have the test print for Anthony's book right in front of me.
Nice.
So yeah, basically, I've got great news. So with Python Basics, and we're gonna launch it really soon in the paperback version. So depending on when this podcast comes out, maybe it's already out, and I think we'll add a note to the show notes then. But with CPython internal, so Python Basics is done. We're just gotta launch it. Paperback looks wonderful. Like, I'm so happy, with the team, everything that we've put together there. It's been this like incredibly long and arduous process, and we had like a really long early access phase, did lots of rewriting based on reader feedback, and the end result is just absolutely awesome. Like, I can't wait to get the paperback out in people's hands. And the same for CPython internals. I mean, it especially two books next to each other look wonderful with the custom artwork and everything that we have for them.
Yeah, I like Aldrin's work on that one especially.
yeah, we're trying to establish like a bit of a color theme too, so we can say like, okay, maybe this is more like a beginner's book, maybe this is more like an advanced level book. And
okay,
I don't know, just really pleased with how it turned out. And CPython internals is, we're doing like the review, or kind of like QA on the paperback version. And again, I think it looks wonderful. Anthony did a fantastic job kind of presenting the information there. And I think it's a one of a kind book, really. It's the subtitle is Your Guide to the Python 3 Interpreter, and it breaks down how CPython or Python works at the interpreter level, and also helps people contribute back to the project and understand like how all the different pieces fit together. And it's just really great. So to answer the question, we're gonna need a little bit more time to review the paperback, make sure it's ready for release. But then it should also be available pretty soon. Like, I would say like on the order of weeks.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's not going to take very long, and I think that's going to be great too.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. Definitely, as a person who's kind of newer to Python, I've been reluctant to dive into the C portion, and think about the internals of Python. But the podcast has been my chance to explore that more and more, talking to not only like data science people and them talking about different ways of implementing like, different C structures and things like that to kind of, speed up certain things that they're working on. But that conversation I had with Brett Cannon about his sort of deep dive and trying to unravel it started to make it feel like, oh, okay, I can, I should be able to dive into this and be able to, navigate through what's happening as far as the different structures and so forth. So I feel a lot less nervous about it. I mean, it's definitely more of a, intermediate to advanced topic, but I'm feeling more and more confident all the time with my time in it. And, definitely having talked to Anthony before, I can definitely see where he's kind of coming from as a teacher. I hope to have him on the show again about it. I think that we should work toward that soon with the podcast, with the release.
That'd be great. Yeah, definitely. I mean, that'd be a great way to celebrate the release. And I would agree. Like, this stuff is so fascinating, because you can kind of push it all away for a really long time. Like, when I usually don't think about these things when I'm working in Python code, and you're kind of in that universe. But then every once in a while, it's like, well, it's really kind of good to know how the garbage collection stuff works, or how some of these like parsing things work. Yeah, just Anthony's really done like a stellar job on this, and just really broken it down into actionable little things. Like, he basically shows you as part of the book, like he shows you how to make changes to the Python syntax and add like new operators and stuff. So things you can't do from within Python code directly, but you have to go through modifying the actual like interpreter C code. It's just super cool, because it gets you to do stuff like right away, and you're actually like making practical changes. Yeah, I think this is super nice. It's really good.
Yeah, cool. All right, so here's my chance to finally ask Dan Bader himself my weekly questions. So what are you excited about in the world of Python?
What am I excited about? I am really excited about the kind of the forward progress. It's been, there's been like many changes recently,
Yeah.
or not so recently in like leadership and stuff, and a lot of like change around basically when Guido stepped down from,
BDFL.
I mean, he's still,
Yeah.
he's still like the dictator for life, but
Yeah.
benevolent dictator. But there's been like quite a change there, and with these things, I mean, you're never sure how they're going to work out, and it's been great to see just how strong the language is, how strong like the core dev team is, and just, that they've been able to release new stuff nonstop, seeing a lot of like changes and improvements to the language that we can argue about whether or not everybody likes them. I'm thinking about like, well, back when that happened, like the walrus operator
Right.
stuff, or and now like most recently the match case constructs. But I'm generally like really excited about that, and I think it shows that there's so much strength behind Python and the community, and so much interest in like improving the language, and I mean also experimenting with it to a certain degree, right? And I think that's just huge news, and I think it's also going to mean that more and more people are going to use Python for various things, which I think is great too. I mean, it's obviously like great for real Python as well, but just from a perspective of like, more people are going to be in touch with this wonderful language, and hopefully develop a passion for programming through it. And I think that's just super cool. And all these like positive, like all this movement that we've seen, like it really encourages me and makes me think, it's not resting.
Yeah.
Like
No,
it's
no, it
it's
definitely
moving
isn't.
moving forward. Yeah, full steam ahead.
Yeah, I was watching the PyCascades talks, and they had the kind of core developer team, a handful of them, along with Guido,
Mhm.
talk about the types of progress that they were able to make and what it was like, to do that over the last year with all the constraints with not being able to meet in person and so forth. And it was a very interesting conversation. And they're definitely all there and passionate to keep going. And as I get closer over this last year to members and different points inside the community, and feeling more and more like a member myself, which has been cool.
Mhm.
It's just neat, and it's very vibrant and very alive. And I mean, yes, there's lots of let's just call it conversation. But I think in the last several months, I've seen more and more consensus, and I'm starting to understand the PEP process a little better.
Mhm.
And there's a lot going on, but I don't, I feel like all of it's coming from a place of good faith, and wanting to expand the language in positive ways, and not break people's stuff, and just allow for newer and more interesting uses. And that's one of the things I definitely would I'd like to talk to Guido about, is like his the whole change to the peg parser and that kind of stuff, and what kind of changes that allows. And I think that stuff would be interesting to talk about too.
That'd be super interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it would be it would be amazing to have him on the show. I mean, definitely an interview that I'd be very much looking
Yeah,
forward to.
totally.
And yeah, and also kind of being more in touch, I guess, with the what's happening there in the like language design process, and because I've been running real Python for a couple of years now, and just really, well, just being aware of everything that's happening, really, right? And just, it's, I mean, that's just my day job.
Yeah.
It's a passion, but it's also like what I do for work. And so it just, the amount of like responsibility and stuff that's resting on like the dev team's shoulders, or some of the more like prominent folks there, is just I mean, yeah, it's incredible. And then also with any change you make, I think there's always like a percentage of people are really unhappy with it, whatever it is. And so to also have like just having to absorb that to a certain degree, I mean, it can be tough. And it's been so cool to see, that's not stopping anybody. And there's yeah, there's still a lot of interest in like in the language, and improving it and making better, and trying out things. And not all of them are going to work, but some of them will probably work out really great. So I don't know. I'm just really excited about
Yeah.
the stuff that's happening there. Can't wait to play with that myself.
Yeah, totally. So what do you want to learn next?
What do I want to learn next? I think I wanna become a better manager. I think that's what I'm, it's not exactly like programming related, but
Kind of
when I
is,
look at
you know?
yeah, what I do sort of day to day, I think there's lots I have to learn in terms of, building Real Python, the company and the team around it. And I think we're also at a point now where, there's a bigger return on that investment rather than like trying to maximize my time coding or like squeeze out some more, improvements. And it's really something that I'm struggling with, like finding a balance. But yeah, I don't know, that's the honest answer. Like I just feel like, yeah, I just feel like that's an area I want to work on, in the next year or so. And
Have you found good resources?
have I found good resources? Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of books out there, and it can be hard sometimes to find good resources that are kind of more focused on the type of like remote
Right.
team that we are, because many things don't. I mean, maybe it's less so about like purely management, but more like company building and building teams, and also making sure kind of we're not, we're having like processes and stuff, but we have the right amount of them, and we have them set up in a way where it actually like helps us achieve our goals and not like detracts us from that. Because I guess, we've all been exposed to, well, I'm speaking for myself here, like, certainly been exposed to that in other jobs and stuff, where it just felt like, okay, this is not helping anybody, but if you want me to do it, I'll do it.
Right.
And so I'm sort of terrified of creating that in my own company, although I probably already have done that. I'm not going to ask you now. And so anyway, to recommend a book, like I found, so we use Basecamp internally, which is sort of like a Slack like tool, but it's not really Slack. It's more like a forum. And I like that because Slack is very sort of real-time focused, which is good for some things, like the community chat that we have. But for like internal team communication across time zones and whatnot, I don't want to create a lot of distractions for everybody. So we're using Basecamp, which is a bit more focused on like longer form writing, and sort of more like forum based, and it has like a to-do list, but it also has a chat in it, but it kind of de-emphasizes it a little bit, and automatically like disables it on the weekends and whatnot. And so the company that makes it is called Basecamp. They used to be called 37 Signals, and they've the founders there wrote a series of books on remote work, and I think they most recently also published another one. And I can pretty much recommend all of them. And because they've been at this for a while, and it's become so relevant, for a lot of companies now with COVID. And so I don't want to pick out like any specific one, but basically look for Jason Fried. That's one of the founders, and the company's called Basecamp. And then you'll be able to find the books. And yeah, I would probably recommend all of those. I've found them incredibly helpful. Very opinionated, but I think that can be good, just to kind of take in someone else's system and then look at
Right.
what makes sense, and what's working for them could maybe work for us as well. And so yeah, I think that's a big theme for me right now.
Cool. All right. So this is one I thought about reworking. The question is, what is something you thought you knew about Python but you were wrong about it? And then I thought about rewording it somewhat. What is something you thought you knew about real Python but were wrong about?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So you can answer one or both.
Either way. Yeah, I think for Python, I could probably just give like a meta answer, where it's like, yeah, I mean, I feel like there's always new stuff to learn. Like I jump into our like when people ask like questions in the community chat there quite a bit, and try to answer questions, or if I have just something gives me a spark, and I'm like, oh yeah, I've done this before. Like here's the answer. Like here's how I would do it. And it kind of blows my mind, what people are surfacing. Like even in things that I feel like I've already worked with before, but there's always someone who can like write another like iter tools based thing that transforms some kind of generator expression and whatnot. And I'm like, wow, okay, this is just super interesting. I wish I had like a more concrete example, but yeah, that's going to be my answer for that. And then what I learned something I learned about real Python is, I would say, just so one of the things I set up, and you've seen this, Chris. Like, so we have this kind of survey that runs on the site that asks people like randomly, sample some like a uh, like a percentage of people are visiting the site,
Yeah.
and just asks them like, hey, would you recommend the site to friends and colleagues, and then gives a rating from between 1 and 10. So it's called an NPS score, and there's like a whole methodology around
Yeah.
it. But basically what it is, it gives you sort of an idea of like, hey, are we sort of trending up or down? Are we about the same? Did we maybe make a change that's really bad and it's upsetting a lot of people, or something that's really good? And just like a general, like, how are we doing there? And I hooked this up the other day to our Basecamp. And so there's a bot now that posts this into our community like area in Basecamp. And a lot of times, like, people type in like a comment with their rating as well.
Right.
It was like this outpouring of love, because it's generally we get like really good scores, and then the when people leave a comment, I think they're generally like sort of more leaning towards like being a positive rating. So that definitely like biases a bit, and that's what the bot actually shares. Like, it's just sharing any comment that people post. And man, like, it's just been so cool that almost every single day there's like a little note there. And yeah, I don't know. It just kind of warms my heart, and it's so hard sometimes to see that, because obviously the feedback that surfaces is many times like when somebody's unhappy or something's going wrong, or we had like some like infrastructure hiccup the other day where like a vendor that we were using was down for a while, and so emails weren't delivered, and so people were waiting for some stuff that they had requested from the site, and or like a password reset or something like that. And then when that happens, like, it's immediately like, hey, this doesn't work.
Right.
What is this? Like, it's really frustrating. And I get it. It is frustrating. It sucks. Like, I hate it. Out of all people, I hate it the most when that happens. And then hooking up this feed, and then like waking up in the morning and checking it, and just seeing kind of the positivity that comes from that is just super
thing.
cool.
Yeah. Just as a note, I encourage people to write reviews for the podcast too. I really love that feedback too. So
definitely, yeah. I mean, we have a feed for that as well, right? Like in our it's called Chartable, and so they pull out that stuff too.
They pull the stuff off of iTunes,
it.
Apple Podcasts.
Yeah,
and occasionally I've thrown out a request for it, but yeah, it's good to know. And we also have a thing on the site for questions, podcast@realpython.com. You can send us questions or topic ideas, things that you're interested in. I'm definitely compiling a lot of that and setting up lots of new guests. So keep that stuff coming.
Yeah. Did we ever get another like voicemail? Like we've got this thing set up.
We haven't gotten any voicemails in a while. So I'd say from almost the summer. So there we still have that on. But you can leave a voicemail, and longtime listeners might remember a few of those.
Let's see if we get some voicemails.
Yeah, please. I like those
after this. But
I
think that's another one of these things where we're like, yeah, this seemed like such a cool idea. I mean, certainly I was like,
people are going to want to
excited
do this,
about
right?
this. Like, this is going to be so amazing, right? And we signed up for this thing, and like, it works. We tested it a bunch and everything. But then, really, when you look at it, it's just not maybe like a way that people want to engage with the show. Right?
Well, we have a lot of new listeners, so maybe people just don't know. So hopefully they can find these things. And again, you can just go to realpython.com/podcast, and you can see all this stuff, along with all the the feeds, and you can follow us on all these different ways to check out the show. Been kind of amazed by the amount of listeners inside of Spotify and inside of YouTube. I didn't think those platforms would be as large as they are, but they're definitely large and growing. So
yeah, I mean, it's been amazing. Like, again, I think you've done such a fantastic job, like also bringing the podcast to YouTube. And I know, like, initially, we weren't so sure. Should we keep that up? Is that really a place where people want to listen to podcasts? But I think there is like a decent chunk of people who want to use YouTube for podcasts. And why not do it? I mean, it doesn't take us
doesn't take too much work.
An incredible amount of time. And so
I add all those links so that they can kind of search through it, kind of like chapters. And that now works across YouTube, which is pretty cool if you have those markers in there. So there's kind of like sections people could go, and if they got interrupted, they can go back and listen to a certain thing, or they can skip ahead to a certain subject they're interested in, which is really fun. The show notes are still on the site with everything on there. Or if you're using a fancy player, all the show notes are inside there, something like Overcast or Pocket Casts or so forth. So yeah, if you're listening on YouTube or you're listening on Spotify and you're like, well, where are all these links and all these things we're talking about? You should check it out. There's tons of that stuff.
They're in the drop down menu.
Yeah, there's lots there.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Dan's, we got to not be so long before you come on again. Come back and visit soon, hopefully.
Yeah, well, if you can make time in your busy schedule for me,
yeah.
I'll certainly come back.
All right, sounds good. All right, well, we'll talk to you soon.
Cool. Thanks, Chris.
All right, bye. This episode was brought to you by PyCharm. Get a free 3-month subscription to PyCharm Professional Edition with this promo code, RealPython. That's RealPython, all caps, no spaces. I really want to thank Dan Bader for coming on the show this week. And I want to thank you for listening to the Real Python podcast. Make sure that you click that follow button in your podcast player. And if you see a subscribe button somewhere, remember that the Real Python podcast is free. If you like the show, please leave us a review. You can find show notes with links to all the topics we spoke about inside your podcast player or at realpython.com/podcast. And while you're there, you can leave us a question or a topic idea. I've been your host, Christopher Bailey, and look forward to talking to you soon.